So just be praying for that, for the folks who will be doing that. Brother Josias will be leading the music. We'll have some special singing, and we'll have a short message, have a little bit of fellowship time, and we'll actually go, probably some of the ones that are shut into their own rooms, we'll go and do some visits with them. My wife has made some packages to give some gifts to each one of them with a little bit of chocolate. They don't have any dietary restriction as per the facility manager, so that's really good. So just be praying that God will use that, and you'll be surprised that this will open doors not just to them, but also to their families, because most of them are all locals. That means their children, their grandchildren come and visit them on a regular basis. So this will open doors of opportunity for us to be able to get into some homes and reach some people and maybe bring them in the church as well, which is, always the goal is to see people saved. All right, so just by way of introduction, now the lesson is not specifically on this topic, but since we're on Easter, we might as well get some Easter education to go along with everything else. All right, and this will be a short little brief thing, so we're going to go ahead and pray in just a second here, and then we're going to get busy, okay? Let's go ahead and turn to Psalm chapter 1 and verse 1. We're going to read there first. Psalms 1:1, please. Now, we're on education, so it's all about learning. And it should be about learning for each one of us. Learning more about Christ and what he demands and what he wants for us is always the goal as a Christian. All right? So in Psalms 1:1, it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful." And I just want to go to this part where it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly." Now, as we talked about, our topic that we've been studying on for the ABCs of Christian maturity, we're on E, the letter E, and the letter E is on education, right? We have been focusing for the last few weeks on education when it comes to children and what a parent's responsibility is. And we talked about Proverbs chapter 22. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old will not depart from it," right? We talked about that. We talked about the fact that people use that verse as some kind of warranty program. But it really is a responsibility of the parent to educate the child, to teach the child in the way they should go. But that doesn't guarantee what they're going to do, okay? Because if that worked so well, then David wouldn't have had a problem with any of his children, right? Or the parents of Samson wouldn't have had a problem with their child. Because the child has a free will. But a parent has a responsibility to educate, to train, to teach. And we talked about education is more than just information. Okay? Information is nice, but information without knowledge and experience and training and instruction, it results in no wisdom. Right? Because there's a lot of people that have education. Look at all the people at Columbia University that are standing around trying to kill off Jews, really. They were protesting to kill Jews. Well, apparently they don't have much of an education because they go to that Ivy League college and they're not taught how to respect life. Right? I mean, really. So apparently education with information is not real education. Right? So I did this handout. This is obviously not along, this kind of goes with it, but it's talking about the difference between counsel and the ungodly, which is really the education of the ungodly. And so I figured I might as well give a practical topic, okay, since we're at Easter. So since we're at Easter, I want to do something real simple, okay? I know how to count to 3. We all know how to count to 3, but apparently religion does not know how to count to 3, okay? And so education. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3. Okay? Right? Everybody agrees with that, right? Amen. But in the religious world, we don't agree with it because everybody's running around for Good Friday. Right. I don't think Good Friday, bad Friday is bad Friday. As far as I'm concerned, there's no Good Friday. Okay? Because what's good about Friday? Jesus was still in the grave. Right. What is good about Friday? I'm thinking about Sunday, Resurrection Day. Okay, so this is a real simple but very hard to come by little chart. Because if you go to Google, the Counsel of the Ungodly, or Yahoo, or all the rest of the other search engines, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get Catholic information. And I don't even know how anybody can do this math, okay? They all say that Jesus was crucified on a Friday. Okay? I don't know how you can get being resurrected on a Sunday if you're crucified on a Friday when the Bible said it has to be 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale like Jonah. You can't count the 3 that way. Now, I told this one guy, I says, well, let me ask you a question. Let's just go back to Sunday, okay? Sunday doesn't really count because that's when he was alive. He came up out of the grave, right? So I go like, let's go 3. Can you get Friday in that? Can't get Friday, can you? It's impossible. But if you're religious and you're in a religious system and they tell you it was Friday when he was crucified and he came out on Sunday, you will believe it. Okay? The counsel of the ungodly. Everything that we learn as a Christian ought to be based on God's word. Okay? It ought to be the foundation. Because religion will trick you every time. Satan has a counterfeit for everything. He has a counterfeit for truth. And so, I'll let you take the time to read this, but it's very simple. Sometimes it can be confusing when you think about the difference between a Wednesday for a Jew on Nisan days versus Wednesday on a Roman calendar. Okay? We do understand that, right? During the time of Jesus, when you think about the accounting, if it's coming from the Romans, it's going to be different than the coming from a Jew. Okay? The Jewish calendar is different. The Jewish day is different. They do it simple. You know, sun's up, sun's down. It's pretty simple. They don't start till the sun comes up. Kind of simple, right? For them. For us, we depend on our clocks, right? We depend on our clocks to tell us when the next day is. Okay? So just read this. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help you. But all I want to say is that you need to watch out for your education, because guess what? Your kids are getting this. Now you imagine this. It's about as bad as Santa Claus. Okay? And I'm not trying to be mean, but it's about as bad as Santa Claus. Or the misrepresentation of St. Patrick. Okay? There's real people, and there's real things and real facts. And believe it or not, St. Patrick was a Baptist. You won't get that from the Catholics. They already stole it from. They stole St. Patrick. You know? He was a Baptist. They stole him. Just like Pastor was talking about holy. The charismatics stole the word holy living from us. When a Baptist hears the word holy, especially fundamental, independent, Bible-believing, Bible-practicing Baptists, you say something about holy, everybody gets scared. You go, oh, we're going to be charismatic. Better stay away from that word. Okay? But not when it's used right. It's almost the difference between happy and gay, you know? If we get it back, gay just means I'm happy. But if you take the sodomite, you can't even get a rainbow anymore. Rainbows are bad. You guys know that, right? What a rainbow means? That's for the sodomites. They stole our rainbow. They stole gay. They stole the rainbow. They stole marriage. Okay? But our children ought to be educated different. Okay? So our foundation of education is God's Word. All right. So if you have your books, we were on page 74. I passed out something and we're finishing up. I promise we're finishing children today. Okay? We're going to move on to adult education because we need it too. Right? If you think you stop learning, the only way that should happen is you are dead. And then God gives you all the information you need. Because he gives us a new body, gives us new everything, and everything will be known. But until then, we ought to be educated, getting educated. Okay? When you stop learning about God, learning about his purpose for your life, you stop looking to learn more things, even about what's around you and what effect it has on you, according to God's word. You don't want to be ignorant. Okay? If you watch TV and watch the news especially, you see a lot of ignorance. Because people are running around going like, They tell you what you ought to hate. They tell you what you ought to like. And the world we live in, we got children running around hating what somebody tells them to hate. Like, for instance, I don't understand this. Okay, the Doge thing about balancing the budget. Okay, or getting rid of fraud. I don't know. Who should be against that? Getting rid of fraud. That's my tax money, right? My tax money getting spent on things that I didn't even know they were spending it on. And I should be angry when I find out somebody's been spending my money on things I don't agree to. That's no different than me tithing and going to a church, tithing to a church that's not really doing the right things with the money. I would have a problem with that, right? Well, now I got a whole nation I've been tithing to, probably at 25%, if not more, and they've been abusing my money. I want my money back, or I want them to spend it right. Okay? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, unto God what is God's, but it ought to be done right. Okay? But to get mad for people trying to figure out where your money's going, that takes a lack of education. Sorry. And I'm sure if there's some liberals listening out here online, I ain't saying sorry. All right, moving on. Page 74. So on page 74, I did a handout a couple weeks ago. It's basically over the period of normal weeks, my child averages the following amount of educational experiences. Okay, and it's true for every child. Okay, because they're learning and they're absorbing. It's formal education, that means at school, or homeschool, or doing your PACES and ACE. Undistracted studying for another test, doing homework, going to Sunday school, actually listening at Sunday school, going to listen to preaching and actually listening to preaching and learning from the preaching you hear. Home Bible instruction, if you have family devotionals. Parental guidance, that is when the parent or mother actually instructs practical things about education, meaning doing things like how to fix the car, how to change the oil, how to rotate a tire, how to fix a flat, how to jump start the car. When the refrigerant is low and the air conditioner won't work, how to charge the air conditioner, things like that. And then the last one is watching TV. And it basically, it's a little chart, you fill it in and say how many hours is done in each one of those things with your child. Because I believe sometimes we don't learn about things until we actually put it on paper and pen. At least I'm that kind of guy. You find out when my wife has honey-do list, if she just tells me things, it ain't gonna work. But if it's written down, she's got a good chance of me finishing them off. Okay? It's the same thing about looking at your life. Where do you spend your time? Because those are the things that are educating you. And those are the things that are educating your children. Believe it or not. Whatever you're doing, whatever's going in the eye gate, in the ear, is educating you. You can say no, but it's not true. It is educating you. You're learning, or it's dulling your senses, one or the other. All right, so that was a list that we gave out to give to you to give to your children, or you to assess your children's learning environment. What things has the most amount of their time? Not to say that probably if your kids go to school, public school, or even Christian school, that's probably going to be the biggest influence on their education. Okay? Next to how much time the parent spends doing some, what we call on-the-job training, like mom teaching the kids how to cook. That's education. Because guess what? When I left the home, my mom didn't have to worry about if I was going to be able to wash my own clothes, cook my own food. By the time I was 10, I already knew how to do laundry. I already knew how to make grits, because that was the only thing important, and french fries, of course. Cut some potatoes up and throw them in some, grease. That was it. I learned how to do that. And how to open the cereal box, of course. Yeah, I've learned how to do that. And Pop-Tarts in the toaster. I got that one really good. Me and Pop-Tarts were really good friends. But every child, every parent, or a person that's even single, they should have a goal on what they want to make sure that their children will be able to survive in this world we live in. This is like I told my kids, I said, look, unless you want to pay somebody $150 an hour to do your rotating your tires, you're changing your oil, you better learn how to change your oil. I told him, I said, unless you are planning on being rich, I don't think you're going to be able to afford to get people to fix your car. Okay? Because that's the choice. Either you make a lot of money and you pay somebody to do it, or you do it yourself. Okay? Or you finance it. You know, getting that oil change, you're still making payments on the oil change? Because there are people doing that. And that's because they were not properly instructed, trained, and taught. And it has to be at home. Okay? You may not agree with it, but just the fact is I used to say this in the Navy all the time. If it wasn't for lazy people, I wouldn't be where I am today. I used to say that. I'm in charge of a bunch of guys, and they think I'm looking good. I'm like, I'm not looking good. I just think I'm just not lazy. You beat out a lazy person by just coming to work on time. Because they don't even come to work. They wasn't even trained to get up on time, to obey their alarm clock. Okay? So that's important for you to think about. And if you don't have any children, if you're going to have children, you're thinking about getting married, not even thinking about getting married, but it's going to happen anyway, possibly, you want to be ready. Have some goals. I'm going to train my children after the Lord, and I'm going to make sure my boys can know how to do this, and my girls know how to do this. And technically, I would say I would teach my girls how to do everything my boys know how to do, at least have an understanding of it. Because guess what? The biggest target at a car dealership, at a car repair place, is women. They'll tell you, you got an oil leak under here, and we need to replace your transmission and your oil pan and this and that. When really, last time somebody serviced your oil, they over-poured it and poured it on the side, and it dripping down off the top of the engine every time it gets hot. Not an oil leak. Okay? But the lady says, oh, Dad, they called the dad and says, Dad, I went to the car place and they told me I need to replace my engine because I got an oil leak. And it's going to be $3,000. And they will take your $3,000 and give you the same engine you had. They just wash the engine off. They do a $20 job and charge you $3,000 for it. There's a reason why some of the best paid people that I know are mechanics. Okay? They're not doctors and lawyers. Because a mechanic don't need malpractice insurance. And they don't have to go to school for 10 years and have to pay off student loans. A mechanic can go to school for 6 months and learn how to do everything and charge you $150 an hour to do it. Think about it. All right, moving on. All right, so we read that verse. It says in Psalms 1:1, a believer should not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. Education should not be from the ungodly. Okay? And you always want to check it out when they give it to you. Okay? When I go to the internet and I'm doing a Google search for something, like I said, when I did the Google search on the resurrection, just trying to see if I could find a chart or something, I literally had to do like a couple of, probably maybe 20 searches before I actually found something that was scriptural. Okay? All right, Psalms 1, verse 2. And we're still there in Psalms chapter 1, verse 2 says, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. Our education ought to come from God's word. Amen. The foundation of our education, the foundation of how we train our children, the foundation of how we should make decisions about our Christian life should come from God's word and God's word only. Okay? If something is being done that contradicts God's word, it's wrong. Okay? If something you're thinking or hearing from an educator, professor who thinks they know everything, if it contradicts God's word, it's wrong. You have to settle that up. And I was going to talk about this later on at the end of the education when you decide to send your child to whatever institution, college, because, it's almost impossible for some education to be done anywhere but in the secular world. And remember we say secular, it's not really real, right? All education should be spiritual. but let's say for the purpose of talking about the difference between worldly education from the regular system or education system that we have currently versus under Christianity, let's say you're sending your child to a secular college. You want to make sure they're ready to go somewhere. They're ready to defend the faith. Okay? I have seen, and it's not just secular education, it's just even the military. I've seen plenty of children, young people, and I spent a lot of time with young people in the military. They told me they came from a fundamental independent Baptist family, and they knew the Lord and everything else, and their parents are good Christians, pastors and deacons and so on. And then they show up in the military, and as soon as they get in the military, next thing you know, they're drinking with the regular sailors, doing the same things they're doing, because they were not ready. They were not ready. Now, I'm not saying that me as a parent is going to make my child ready, because that's a spiritual condition, okay? But at least I would know, I'm going to send my child off, he's going to join the military. I at least let him know, this is what your dad believes, this is what your mom believes, this is what God expects of you. Now, if they choose they're going to live in the sin, they're going to live in sin. I can't fix that, okay? But a lot of parents go into thinking, if you know your child is not mature enough to handle the responsibility, that's where usually the problem occurs. And I've had guys that join the military in their younger ages, and man, they spend their first 4 years just floundering, trying to stop drinking and gambling and doing bad things and chasing bad things. And then you get a kid that's maybe in their 20s and they join the military, and typically when they're in their 20s and they join the military, they're much more mature, and they actually make rank faster than the person who got in the Navy 4 years before them, just because they're already mature. And that's the same thing. Don't rush them off to college. And maybe they shouldn't even go to college. Maybe they don't even want to go to college. Not one single child is the same. I mean, we have one that didn't go to college until, really didn't really do college until now. And he's already 21. He wasn't ready for college at 18. He wasn't ready for college. He wasn't ready for anything. Okay? I'm just being honest. He wasn't ready. Then we have one, he was ready at 17. He was already in college at 17. And he did very well. But he was ready. Not one single person is the same. And as a parent, we ought to know our children enough to be able to give them the advice they need to be equipped to go wherever they're going to go and do whatever they're going to do. Okay? Because they're not all ready at the same time. And I hate to say this, typically the boys are not ready at all. I don't know what that's all about, but the boys seem to have a bigger problem. Maybe they didn't go and play outside long enough. I don't know. All right, so the light. Let's turn to Galatians chapter 5 and verse 19. Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. Now, I want y'all to help me. If I start staring at you too much over here, pastor tells me I need to look at him because, I don't look at him enough. So I'm working on going to the right, but I'm a lefty for some reason. And if I can have someone read that, Galatians chapter 5 and verse 19 to 21. Which of these passages best describes the content of most television programs? Right? You watch a novella? You're like, yeah, Brother Jefferson, you watch novellas? Hey, well, I got to learn my Spanish somehow. No, just kidding. But I was told that was a good way to learn Spanish when I was in college. But since I still don't know any Spanish, I can read, and I used to be able to write a little bit, but no speak, because I'm from South Carolina, and this just never worked out. I don't have the tongue for the R's or the L's, the yah. I don't have all that. But this is what the world we live in. That is what sells on TV, in the movies. what's that got to do with education? Let me tell you a little story. I think I said this once. Our kids, we homeschool our kids, right? And then from homeschool, we decided, well, they're bigger. We're going to take them to Christian school. Because, we want to pay for their education twice because we're paying taxes anyway, right? But we want to pay for their education and send them to Christian school. We think it's Christian school. Everything ought to be good, right? It ought to be perfect. Right? So our kids come back with a new vocabulary. They knew more about movies and talk stuff that I was like, what are you talking about? Where'd you learn that at? At the Christian school from church. Because guess what? When you got a Christian school and they have a couple hundred kids, and if those parents aren't training their kids, whatever their kids learn, our kids learn. And they couldn't even watch those TV. They were listening to Pastor Pirate. That was their entertainment, Pastor Pirate and stuff like that. But yet, they come home talking about this superhero and his girlfriend and that guy and this stuff and having all this extra language. We're talking 10-year-olds and go like, what is going on here? So you have to watch. Just because it says Christian doesn't mean it's really Christian. And just because it says Christian doesn't mean it's spiritual. Okay? Don't assume. The military has a lot to say about assuming. You never want to assume. You got to check it out. You got to verify it. But there's no guarantee. Whoever your kids are exposed to, just like take them to daycare. Take them to daycare, your kids are perfect when they're babies. No problems. They don't get sick that much. Snotty nose every once in a while. You take them to daycare, 5 minutes later, they got the pink eye. Right? They have the pink eye every other month. Well, pink eye can get fixed. Okay, but that vocabulary and the things they learn, it's kind of hard to untrain. Exposure matters. Now I know I got the proponents that says, well, you don't want to shelter them, then they won't be able to socialize with people. They won't be able to have any social skills. Right? Isn't that what they tell you? You give your kid a Christian education, they're going to be all spiritually minded and no earthly good. I think that is a lie from Satan. Okay? Because if you take your child soul winning, they're going to know how to talk to people. Okay? Take them soul winning, they know how to talk to people. They can even learn how to tell them the gospel. So that's just an excuse. Okay? And our most openly talk to everybody child was the one that we did all the experiments of homeschooling with. And that's our oldest, and he has plenty of friends. So, and he had plenty of social skills. Okay? So no, don't let people tell you if you take your kids home, make them homeschool or Christian school or any other kind of program that you're, as a parent, make the decision to educate your children with. Don't let them use an excuse to saying because you try to teach them more spiritual things and immerse them in the Lord, that's going to make them a social butterfly and can't talk to nobody. Okay? Last time I taught, God is the one that gives us the power. It says in Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, he gives the power.
That's right.
Okay? If the Bible's true, which it is, don't believe what you hear about their social skill and they're not going to be able to talk to people. Okay? That is a lie. All right. Moving on. We're going to turn to Romans chapter 1. Psalms 101 and verse 3. And we'll read that. Psalms 101 verses 3 and 4. Says, I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. And verse 4, a forward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. Now that's pretty interesting. Now this is a dedication saying, hey, look, I'm not going to get wicked stuff in front of me. I'm going to keep it out of front of me. So it goes like Thessalonians where abstain from all appearance of evil, right? And this is the psalmist saying the same similar thing that we would find in the New Testament. I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. A forward heart shall depart from me. That means you already know where your heart is, and you're asking God to keep you from having that kind of heart. Now, I should avoid watching anything, including advertisement, that is evil or wrong. That pretty much cut out any of the Super Bowl commercials. Oops. Did I say that? Yeah, I did. That would cut out any of the Super Bowl commercials. Almost all of them have something to do with sexuality, gratification that is not godly, pointing you to get you to do things that you wouldn't normally do as a Christian. And you know God wouldn't want you to do. But that's the world we live in, right? Because they say it sells. So be aware. So, these are the things that influences our children and their education, but also influences our education. You know, Satan can make you think wrong things are right and right things are wrong. Look at the world we live in. There's many things that are flipped. And the only way you can flip those things is you have to train someone, teach someone, educate someone, influence someone to the point where the truth becomes a lie and the lie becomes the truth. And guess where the best place to do that is in the world of education. Right? I know I lived in California for 15 years? We were stationed there for 5 years, and then I ended up doing another 12 years in California. So yeah, it was a lot longer than that. But one of the things we learned, the education system basically retrained children to think that two women were okay to be married to each other. Two men were okay to be married to each other, because if you teach someone that, it's like if I tell you, let's say you're a baby and I told you that blue was red. And all you learned was blue was red. It will be hard if you spent most of your life that blue is red. That's what they're doing to people. That's what they're doing to people. And oftentimes they don't even care what the meaning of what they're talking about. Like, I asked a couple of guys that says, why do you hate Mr. Trump? You know, I asked why you, and cause. I go, what reason? Why you hate him? Is he taking some of your money away? Oh, he's rich. All rich people, you should hate rich people. Why? Because they got money? Because they work for us? I don't hate rich people because they have money. But people think that. We should tax rich people more. Take more money for why? Well, rich people are smart. I said, you take away rich people's money, they just go somewhere else. Then there's no money for you, because now they took the money with them. They're like, yeah, I don't understand this thinking, because it's not from real, true education. Okay? So, the nation has seen definite historical progressions towards God's plan for educating children. It has gone from family education to public education to government education, lastly to social education. Okay? DEI is social education. It is not about facts. It's about feelings. It's about control. And it's not about learning. It's not about being educated. It's not even about choices. It is not even trying to find out about differences in opinion. It's like the social engineering of our children is just think the way we say think, because that's the only way you should think if you want us to be happy with you. And that's the world we live in. But we as Christians, we are the total opposite of that, right? We think the way God thinks. At least we should. And God does not think the way the world thinks. And so we're going to always be at odds with the world we live in. If the world loves you, then you ought to be afraid. And I'm not not saying that to be mean, but if the world loves you and what you stand for, then something's wrong. Because the world is not supposed to love you. We're aliens. We're just passing through. We're supposed to be different. And if you're not different, then you're the same. And that's not good. Our education ought to be God-centered. All right, so we're going to finish that. And so I'm just going to read a little summary, and then we're done, okay? So we're almost done. So the conclusion of this section dealing with education of children, Baptists need to pray much for wisdom and for our children in this matter. It is the most important aspect of raising a generation of children who will shine as lights in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation. Are children school the answer? Are homeschool the answer? Is teaching them homeschool, Christian school? Parents who will heed and follow the clear commands and the principles of God's word and educate their children by them, meaning educate your children. Know what they're learning. There's no guarantee on the choices they're going to make. But I will say this much as a parent. I sleep at night. I sleep well at night. All my children did not make a choice to live for the Lord. But I believe that I did the best I could, my wife and I, to educate them, to teach them, to live a life that gave God glory first. But the choice they got to make was their choice. But they know they made a choice, and the choice was different from ours. I would rather live with that peace of knowing that we gave them the best we could. Not perfect when it comes to their education, but we gave them the best we could. We loved them the best we could according to God's word. And the choice is always theirs. So I have peace about that. And I'm saying that to you folks because some of you are not even getting started yet. Some of you may be already done. And things didn't turn out as well as you thought because they have a choice. I'm pretty sure David, if he saw what Solomon had done, he would have been disappointed. Okay? But Solomon made his own choices. We make our choice to do the best we can with God's help, to educate our children. And I say that is the most important part of educating our children. So next week, we'll be moving on to education of believers, okay? And that is talking about some of the basics of education as a Christian, okay? So let's go ahead and pray, and we'll be done.